I would now like to bring in Teodor Grantcharov. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He is a surgeon and professor of surgery at the University of Toronto. He developed the surgical black box concept, which we heard Eric mentioning a little bit earlier, but I'll let him tell you about it.
Thank you so much for this invitation. I would like to thank the organizing committee, and it's obviously a great pleasure to be here. And I completely agree with something Dan just said in his wonderful talk. And it's especially important to talk about it in a conference like this, a technology conference like this. This is the last slide, by the way. It is not, we need to remember that this is not about technology, this is not about gadgets, this is not about software and so on. We need to remember that everything we do, it is for us as a profession, as doctors, to be better, to provide better care, and to make us safer. It's all about the patients, and we need to remember that. I will talk a little bit about today about a concept that we have been working on for many years. We call it surgical or operating room black box. And there is a major misconception nowadays. Black box is not about video and audio. It's a comprehensive platform that captures information from everything that's happening in the operating theater. And I'm also very proud to announce that in the past couple of days, since I came here in Amsterdam, we were able to install this system at one of the major academic centers here at AMC, and really excited in the next few years to work with our colleagues and partners here and to see what this platform can do for them here in the Dutch environment, and see how we can make operating rooms here safer. So I think all of you have witnessed in the past few years, we've talked so much about big data. And there is this major belief that big data is going to save us. It will show us how to be better surgeons, it will show us how to be better doctors, it will save costs, and it will improve outcomes. But the problem is that in healthcare, we use data primarily to look at what happened and what's happening, but not really use it to do proper data mining and to answer the question of what will happen. How can we use this to predict future performance? How can we use this to predict future outcomes? How can we use this concept to reduce costs, which is so important in the current financial environment in healthcare? This is a study that was published a few years ago in one of the major healthcare journals, New England Journal of Medicine. And I think it's very interesting to see the unacceptably high level of or rate of adverse events in healthcare. Hospitals are not as safe as we want them to be. Operating rooms are not as safe as we want them to be. But what's even more interesting here is that over so many years, despite billions of dollars of investments in better technology, in better software, in better education, we haven't seen a trend towards reduction of adverse events in healthcare, and that's not acceptable. We've seen a number of reports. There was a recent report a few weeks ago showing that this is the third leading cause for mortality in modern society, healthcare. We have to think about it. We have to think, how can we work together, clinicians and industry, to make better systems for increasing safety and better system for reducing costs in modern healthcare. At the same time, and I'm not going to make too many analogies between healthcare and aviation, but obviously we as doctors, we're not pilots and our patients are not airplanes. It's much more complex than that. But we need to learn from this industry, what they have done in the past few decades. They've really turned from safe to ultra-safe industry. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that? Why haven't been able to do similar? Why haven't we seen a similar trend in healthcare that we see in aviation? And I think there are a couple of answers here, and it all is about culture. This is how every surgeon looks in the mirror after a long day in the operating room. We have this weird perception about our own performance. We always think that we're much better than we are. It's very, very difficult when we are in the action to critically reflect on our own performance. And without critically reflecting on our own performance, without understanding what our deficiencies are, we have absolutely no chance of improving. Another problem in current healthcare is, again, about the culture. Somehow we managed to turn the operating rooms, we managed to turn the hospitals into one of the most secretive environments in modern society. Pretty much whatever happens in an operating room stays in the operating room. And it shouldn't be like that. We need to be ready to be open, and we need to be ready to be transparent, and we need to be ready to be accountable. Without an attitude like that, we will never improve. We will never see the same trends like we've seen in aviation and other ultra-safe industries. So we, as practitioners, have a number of concerns nowadays. In 2016, we still talk about learning curves on real patients. We talk about learning curves where the primary outcome is mortality or serious morbidity. Learning curves on real patients should not be acceptable. We should not be accepting that as a profession. We should not be accepting that as a society. We should look for solutions to that problem. We still have this fear for transparency and accountability, and it shouldn't be like that. And it has something to do with the society, with these false expectations we have developed over the years, false expectations for perfection. We, as surgeons, start believing that we're perfect. Our patients obviously expect us to be perfect. They expect us to report 0 errors, 0 adverse events, and that's not the reality. And we need to accept that. We need to accept that errors are acceptable. What's not acceptable is not to learn from them. So we need to change the environment, and we need to change the culture. It's not going to happen overnight, the process that will take years. We still have a totally unacceptable attitude towards error. And it has something to do with the pressures I just spoke about. And somehow along the way, we've developed this way of dealing with errors, with our own errors. We either forget them or deny them or don't accept them. And the moment we exit the operating room, we think about the next patient. The moment we enter the operating room again, we repeat the same errors. And we need to create a system where this is not happening anymore. Other industries, like I spoke about, aviation, military, nuclear, oil industry, all these high-risk industries have developed over the years a number of very well established, very well validated, very well functioning risk reduction concepts, and we haven't learned from them. So we need to open our eyes. We need to work together with industry, with technology developers to introduce these so well-functioning concepts that made this industry so successful in reducing errors and improving outcomes. So that's why we felt that operating room black box is going to help us address some of these issues, the major cultural issues in surgery. The first one is the unrealistic perception of our performance. And the second one is introducing transparency and accountability. And we need to remember that black box in aviation, all of us know the black box as the orange boxes that airlines or we see on TV when there has been an accident, but it doesn't have to be like that. We've worked for many years now with Air Canada. And Air Canada is one of the industry leaders in this process. And they have developed a secondary black box. Very few of us know that. The secondary black box captures thousands of parameters from every flight. Then it's downloaded overnight into the Flight Data Analysis Center in Toronto. And then the team analyzes the day after every flight that Air Canada has operated the day before. They look for deviations from the perfect range. And if there is a flight that where there has been a little bit of deviation, this prompts a very detailed investigation where they work with the pilots, they work the producers of the aircraft, they work with, they investigate the weather, and all these factors that could have contributed to this near miss. The most important thing here, and obviously this makes a lot of sense, we need to capture data from everything we do. With this type of data, we can assess risks, we can assess hazards. If there is a near miss or if there is an adverse event, we can perform a very effective root cause analysis, and only with information like this, we can create effective mitigation strategies. Without information like this, without knowing what we've done wrong, we have absolutely no chance of getting better. One of the most important things in this process that can kill it in healthcare is the principle of confidentiality and the main principle of making it non-punitive. If we don't do that as a society, if we don't address this problem as a society, this will never take off in healthcare the way it took in aviation. So what does it really do? What does the operating room black box really do? It captures, as I said, not only video and audio. This has been done for decades, and that makes it impossible to analyze and scale up. It captures a lot of digital data from the operating room, from how many times the door opens and closes, how many people are in the room, what is the temperature, what is the decibel level. We capture software data from the devices we use. We capture physiological data from the patient. Then the black box captures all this information, synchronizes it, and produces a file that allows us to understand what really happened and reconstruct the real events in this operating theater. And for the first time, we can start working towards understanding the real factors that contribute to poor outcomes, to negative outcomes. So far, as a profession, we've looked, and there are thousands of papers out there looking at mainly factors associated with the patient, factors associated with the technology, but there's been very little information, very little work around one of the most important factors that can determine good or bad outcome, and that's the surgeon and the operating room team. And we can do that now. And again, with an information like that, we can understand our deficiencies, our individual deficiencies, or our deficiencies as a team, and we can create targeted educational interventions to fix these deficiencies. So this is how it looks like. We have it in a number of operating rooms, and as I said, we yesterday performed the first case here in Amsterdam. We analyzed it together with our colleagues and the entire team, the nurses, the surgeons, the anesthetists, and we even though the cases went amazing, the patients are probably already discharged and everybody was satisfied, we saw so many opportunities to be better. And we need to remember that. We can always improve, and we have to use every single opportunity to improve. This is the pilot we did in Toronto a few years ago. And in the pilot, we included a little bit more than 50 procedures. All of them went fine. But the surprising thing here was that using the operating room black box, we identified 66 adverse events or near misses during these procedures. The most important thing was that at the end of the procedure, and after each procedure, we asked the entire team, the nurses, the surgeons, the anesthetists, did you notice anything unusual, or do you think everything was perfect? In 75% of the cases where there was an adverse event or a near miss, the team didn't notice it. They said, we feel that everything was fantastic, everything was perfect. So obviously there was a tremendous waste, tremendous loss of information here. Tremendous loss of information that could be used to get better, that could be used to make us safer and better surgeons and better team players. So we shouldn't be losing this information. We should be using this information from every case, and we should be using it to get better for constructive purposes. Now, the way it works is every procedure is analyzed, and all of us get a report at the end. We know how many errors we did. We know where were the errors done, how were they done, what was the mechanism, and again, the most important question, what can we do to fix this? What can we do to eliminate these errors, and what can we do to reduce the number of adverse events and to reduce the costs associated with these adverse events? We can also measure other parameters like the disruption in the operating room. We can analyze the design of our operating theaters. We can analyze the performance of all the devices. And as you all know, there are newer devices coming every day. All of them are designed to make us safer, to make us more efficient. But sometimes they introduce new threats, new risks in the operating room, new hazards. And we need to understand those proactively. We need to shift this concept from reactive safety in healthcare, where we wait for something bad to happen and then find a way to fix it. And we need to turn it into proactive, where we consistently and continuously monitor our performance. We identify the trends that could contribute to adverse outcomes, and we do something about it. And what can we use this for? We can use it for so many things. The information is so useful. And really, it has changed the way we look towards our performance. It's now, I remember when I started a few years ago at my hospital, at St. Michael's Hospital in downtown Toronto, we were only a couple of surgeons, a couple of nurses, a couple of anesthetists who wanted to pilot this idea, this project, and now we've got almost 100% of our perioperative teams. We noticed that it brought us together. It made us better surgeons, made us better nurses, and better anesthetists, and we functioned much better. We also can use this in case that there is an adverse event, similar if there is a crash, which is extremely rare in aviation. We can perform a very effective root cause analysis. We can really understand what happened. What was the triggering small error that induced a chain of events that result in adverse outcomes. And again, with this knowledge, we can change our performance, we can change the way we train, we can change the way we design ORs, and avoid this happening in the future. We can also assess efficiency and do something about the efficiency, because it's so important these days in the current financial situation to be more efficient and reduce costs. And I'm gonna, towards the end of my talk, I want to share an example of how we use this in a study that we performed a couple of years ago. And deliberate practice is a term that was introduced by a Swedish psychologist who practiced in Florida, who studied elite athletes and elite musicians. And one of my favorite quotes from Vince Lombardi, who is the most successful coach, one of the most successful coaches in NFL history, is practice does not make perfect. It's the perfect practice that makes perfect, and there is no perfect practice without knowledge of what we do right and what we do wrong. And this is what the operating room black box is about, showing us, helping us identify our deficiencies, helping us work with our deficiencies and improve our performance. So we wanted to trial this in real life. So we had a bunch of surgeons, and we had them do some procedures on real patients. We randomized them to two groups. One group performed the procedure on patients, and then another. And then the deliberate practice group performed the procedure on a patient where they removed the gallbladder. Then their performance was assessed by the operating room black box. They received constructive feedback about their deficiencies, and we constructed educational interventions to fix these deficiencies. And then they performed another procedure in the operating room. And the results were really not shocking. The conventional practice group didn't improve. They were the same, while the deliberate practice group that received their performance report, that did something about their deficiencies, they improved significantly in the next procedure. And that's what we want to see in every single procedure we do, and every day. We want to feel that every day we leave the operating room, we learn something about our performance. We learn something about our collaboration in the operating room, and we've developed ideas of how to get better tomorrow. So this is the whole concept is about. Like everything in life, a simple error doesn't result in a disaster. A simple error can initiate a chain of events that may result in an adverse outcome. With this approach, with this concept, with this platform, we can do a much better job at analyzing our performance, understanding our errors, learning how to identify them early. We can also create awareness about the chain of events that can result in adverse outcomes, and we can create better education around it. And we've been doing it now for a few years with great success. And the whole purpose of this is, again, it's not about developing new technology, it's not about developing new software. It's about reducing adverse outcomes. It's again, all about the patient. So to summarize it, we need to remember that as a profession, we need to set realistic goals. And setting a perfection as a goal is not realistic. We need to acknowledge that as long as there are humans involved in surgery or in healthcare, there will be errors. We need to change our culture. And as I said before, it's not going to happen overnight. It will take years to get used to the new culture of transparency, accountability, critical reflection on our own performance. And this assessment and critical reflection is critical. Without this, no matter how much money is invested in healthcare, no matter how much new technology is introduced in healthcare, without this knowledge, we will not improve. We will see the same rates, we will see the flat trends in adverse events, and this will continue forever. We need to learn, we need to create a system that helps us create a healthy attitude towards human error. We need to learn to recognize it, we need to learn to tolerate it, and we need to learn from it. We also need to better understand the factors that can contribute to adverse events, because without this knowledge, as I said, we will never improve. We need to learn from other industry, and we need to remember that improving performance in healthcare is an investment, it's not an expense. And I want to finish with one of my favorite quotes from Nike Golf: there is always better. When we graduate, the moment we graduate as physicians, there are two ways. We can either become better or we will get worse. There is no status quo. And whether we get better is in our own hands. Thank you very much.